On November 17th, 2017, a bomb went off in DC. Comics. DC Comics. Justice League was the culmination of the DC Extended Universe. The main issue was that none of the movies focused on what they needed to in order to make that style of movie work. Marvel had movies following each of its main cast members that introduced new elements to contribute to the plot for their big team-up movie. DC wanted to skip to the end and just make a movie where everybody comes together. So to introduce the cast for Justice League, we got Man of Steel to introduce Superman, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice to introduce Batman and Wonder Woman for some reason, Suicide Squad to flesh out the idea of a team-up, I guess, and Wonder Woman to reintroduce Wonder Woman? You see why this works and this doesn't? Since that massive failure, DC seems to have taken a step back on how to approach the films in this shared universe. So now what DC seems to be doing is just letting their films sort of be whatever the artists want them to be. Joker stopped being about Jared Leto's take on the character so that they didn't have to be bogged down by their own sequel baggage. And with Birds of Prey, I think they've finally proven that they're willing to just have fun again with their movies. But only because they were pushed to this point. Ever since they struck gold with Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, they've been fighting tooth and nail to reclaim the spotlight since Marvel almost immediately took it away. After years of trying and failing to make a coherent universe, it seems like DC is content just letting people make movies using their characters. Margot Robbie was the only thing that worked in Suicide Squad, and even then, most of her screen time was ruined by having her pining after the Joker. Now that's all fine and good considering that's one of the most famous aspects of her character, but it didn't work considering that the Joker was this guy. Harley herself was a lot of fun when the movie allowed fun to happen. And now that Harley's free from the Joker and the shackles that came with being in the DCEU, Birds of Prey gives Margot Robbie and the rest of the cast a chance to shine in a film all about having a fun adventure. The thing holding back the DCEU was that it wanted to be this realistic interpretation of this world with literal gods in it. It worked for Batman because it's easy to ground Batman, but it's kind of hard to try and make the rest of the cast realistic in a way that isn't depressingly boring. So here, they just sort of play into it all. We live in a world where some people have powers, no big deal. But even then, a majority of the cast are just people, and really likable people at that. The style of the movie was almost as crazy as Harley was. You know how Suicide Squad was directed and shot to be this realistic movie that was similar in tone to the Snyder films, but in the editing room DC forced them to try to make it fun instead? This film is what happens when you make a movie that is fun from the outset. I loved the chaotic energy the entire film has, leaving everything so unpredictable. This is also the most fun cast of characters I've ever seen in a DC film. Everyone's personality is so different and they play off each other so well. Margot Robbie does an even better job portraying Harley in this movie now that the whole thing is centered on her. She's one of the only things that worked in Suicide Squad because Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn knows how to bounce off of everyone, regardless of their character. My favorite character was Mary Elizabeth Winstead as the Huntress. I loved the misdirection her character has toward the beginning of the film as this silent badass, only for her to be revealed as a doofus who just so happens to be really good at killing. She was such a refreshing take on what is a pretty stereotypical character trope in these kinds of movies. Ewan McGregor was also interesting to watch on screen. His manic personality kept you on the edge of your seat during his scenes because you just didn't know what direction he was gonna go. There was this air of unpredictability to him. He felt like that frat boy president that had mommy and daddy pay for everything for him somehow became in charge of one of the largest crime syndicates in the world. Whenever he was on screen, you never knew if the scene was going to be hilarious or disturbing. There were times where the tone did feel a little off. Like, I get it, this is a movie all about female empowerment, directed, written, and produced by women, but there was some imagery that just felt kind of out of place. Like there was a scene where a blacked out Harley Quinn was being kidnapped, supposedly taken to Black Mask, and the scene just comes off as really rapey. Like she was too drunk to do anything, a creepy dude was messing with her and holding her up against a wall and saying really dirty things. Don't get me wrong, this is a grim reality that many people in the world face every day. But maybe don't give such a hard tonal shift 10 minutes after I'm watching Harley Quinn cry about an egg sandwich. Just a hair of terrible tonal whiplash. Speaking of tonal whiplash, something I will give this movie is that its action is just really fun. Most of these DC movies go kind of crazy with their action. It gets so over the top with invincible people punching each other that it just becomes boring after a while because you can't keep up with what's going on. Birds of Prey has way more fun with its action, using the environment to make every fight scene have its own unique edge to it. The movie goes from a police station to amusement parks to the streets of Gotham, and it mixes up what you can expect from location to location. But once you realize the pattern the movie has, the setups can get kind of predictable. Harley can be walking through the evidence room with the camera making sure to show you everything in the room, and these slow the movie down because now we know to expect an action scene, and whatever our characters are doing before the action starts has no relevance to the actual story. And in a movie that prides itself on being unpredictable, this is a real blemish on its execution. The story also felt a little lost at times, jumping around a lot to flesh out characters' backstory, which is fine. Plenty of movies do this to keep the pacing super fast, but the issue the movie faces is that it doesn't really know when to cut back to the main story. The movie's pace is so quick that when it slows down to reveal a character's backstory, it slows down the entire movie. This is mainly an issue toward the beginning of the film, because once we have our whole cast set up, the movie sticks with its lightning fast pace, which is what the movie needed. To make a movie with a character like Harley Quinn, you want to keep the movie as quickly paced as possible. If you take too long with a single scene or to set up development, then the movie starts to feel very slow. And not because the scene isn't working, but because such a fast precedent was already set for the rest of the movie. And as fun and chaotic as the story is, it isn't the most original thing. Tell me if you've heard this one before. An R-rated comic book movie about an anti-hero with a potty mouth being rejected by more famous characters, learning how to be a better person through an adventure involving a young kid in a bad situation that looks up to them. It's Deadpool 2. It's pretty much just beat for beat Deadpool 2. Like I said, everything DC does is reactionary, even if the reaction is what they were doing wasn't working. Man of Steel was a reaction to the success of the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman v Superman was a reaction to the crossovers Marvel was doing. Suicide Squad was re-edited as a reaction to the success of Guardians of the Galaxy. Justice League was a reaction to the continued success of Avengers, as well as being reshot and rewritten from the backlash of the other Snyder films. Shazam was a reaction to everyone saying DC films weren't fun. Joker was a reaction to the success of Logan, and Birds of Prey seems to be a reaction to the success of the Deadpool films. I'm not entirely saying that this is a bad thing, because it's finally leading to good movies coming from properties that have an insane amount of potential. And while I wish that the movie had a bit more originality to its story, that doesn't take away from how fun this movie can be. Birds of Prey is far from perfect, but if you want a fun action movie that doesn't overstay its welcome, I highly recommend it. It knows how to have fun with itself, even if the movie doesn't always stick the landing. And sometimes, that's all you want. And now I want to hear what you guys have to say. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know down below, or join my Discord so we can get a discussion going. And while I have you here, why not click this playlist over here to see my reactions to other comic book movies? And why not subscribe so you can see whenever I post a new video? Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.